Krell stood at rigid attention, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights of the war room. Around him, fellow Droo soldiers maintained similar poses, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the holographic display at the center of the chamber. The image it projected told a grim tale, a galaxy once dominated by the glorious Droo Empire, now a patchwork of retreating fronts and lost territories. As a veteran of countless campaigns, Krell had seen battles won and lost, but never had he witnessed such a rapid reversal of fortune. The humans, those soft, fragile creatures they had so grievously underestimated, were pushing towards the Droo core worlds with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Supreme Commander Korivex's voice cut through the tense silence. "Warriors of the Droo, hear me. Our empire faces its greatest challenge, but we shall not falter. We are Droo, unbreakable, unyielding, destined to rule the stars." A chorus of affirmative clicks echoed through the room. Krell felt the familiar surge of pride, even as a small voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts he dared not acknowledge. Korivex continued, his tone grave. "Our analysts have identified a critical weakness in the human advance. Their supply lines are stretched thin, reliant on a key colony in the Terran sector. The hologram zoomed in on a small blue-green world. We will strike here, hard and fast. We will disrupt their supply chains and crush their morale in one decisive blow." Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembled soldiers. Krell studied the holographic representation of the human world. It seemed so insignificant, so vulnerable, and yet, this mission. Korivex's voice dropped to a near whisper, forcing the soldiers to lean in. "May well be our last chance to turn the tide. I will not deceive you, the risks are extreme. Many of you may not return, but your sacrifices will be honored for generations to come. Your names etched in the annals of Droo history." Krell felt a shiver run through his exoskeleton. A part of him recognized the desperation in Korivex's words, the barely concealed fear behind the bravado. But that recognition was quickly buried beneath layers of indoctrination and pride. They were Droo. They did not succumb to fear. They did not yield. As the briefing concluded and the soldiers filed out to prepare for the assault, Krell found himself approached by Nixara, a fellow veteran he had fought alongside in many campaigns. "Your thoughts?" Krell Nixara's mandibles clicked in a gesture of familiarity. Krell hesitated for a moment before responding. "It is a bold plan, worthy of the Droo." Nixara's antennae twitched, a sign of skepticism. "Bold, yes, but against these humans. They are not like our previous conquests, Krell. They adapt, they evolve. With each defeat, they come back stronger." Enough, Krell snapped, his own antennae flaring in warning. "Such talk borders on treachery, Nixara. We are Droo. We have ruled the stars for millennia. These humans are but mayflies, their resistance a mere flicker against the eternal flame of our empire." Nixara stepped back, lowering her head in deference. "Of course, squad leader. Forgive my moment of weakness." As Nixara retreated, Krell felt a moment of unease. Had he truly believed his own words, or had they been a reflexive defense against the doubts gnawing at the edges of his consciousness? Shaking off the disquiet, Krell strode towards the armory. There was no room for doubt, no place for fear. He was Droo, a scion of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. This battle would be their resurgence, the moment when they reminded the humans and the universe of the folly of challenging the Droo. As he began to don his battle armor, its familiar weight a comfort, Krell allowed himself a moment of reflection. Whatever happened in the coming battle, he would face it with honor, with courage, with the unshakable pride of the Droo. Let the humans come. Let them taste the full might of a species born to conquer the stars. With a final check of his weapons, Krell marched towards the launch bay. Around him, thousands of Droo warriors prepared for battle, the air thick with the click of mandibles and the hum of energy weapons. As he took his place at the head of his squad, Krell raised his voice in the ancient war cry of his people. "For the Empire. For the Droo. May our enemies tremble before us." The response was deafening, a tidal wave of Droo voices united in purpose and pride. As the cry echoed through the launch bay, Krell felt his doubts fall away. They were Droo. They would not fail. They could not fail. The void of space erupted in a dazzling display of light as the Droo fleet tore through the fabric of reality. Clarke felt the familiar lurch in his thorax as his transport ship decelerated, the blue-green orb of the human colony world filling the viewscreen. "Prepare for atmospheric entry," the ship's AI announced, its tone devoid of the anticipation that thrummed through Clarke's exoskeleton. As the transport plummeted through layers of atmosphere, Clarke addressed his squad. "Warriors of the Droo, remember our briefing. Strike hard, strike fast. Show no mercy, for you shall receive none. For the Empire." "For the Empire," the response echoed through the hold, a chorus of clicking mandibles and thrumming wings. The first hints of resistance came as they breached the cloud layer. Streaks of energy fire lanced up from the surface, most missing their mark, but a few finding purchase on the Droo ship's shields. Pathetic, Nixara chittered from beside Clarke. "Their weapons are as weak as their resolve." Clarke nodded in agreement, but a part of him noted the swiftness of the human response. They had caught the colony by surprise, yes, but not as completely as they had hoped. The transport shuddered as it touched down, ramp descending with a hiss of hydraulics. Clarke was first out, energy rifle at the ready, multifaceted eyes taking in the chaos of the human settlement. Alarms blared across the colony, the shrieks of panicked humans mixing with the whine of Droo weapons fire. Prefabricated structures crumbled under the onslaught, and the night sky blazed with the light of burning atmosphere as more Droo ships made planetfall. "Forward," Clarke commanded, leading his squad towards the colony's central hub. "Secure the command center." They moved with practiced efficiency, exoskeletons gleaming in the firelight, weapons cutting down any humans foolish enough to stand in their way. Clarke felt a surge of pride at the sight of his warriors in action. This was what they were born for, what countless generations of Droo had bred them to be, the ultimate conquerors. As they approached the command center, however, the resistance stiffened. A barricade had been hastily erected, manned not by soldiers, but by colonists wielding a motley assortment of weapons. "Stand aside," Clarke's translator broadcast his words in the human tongue. "Surrender, and you may yet live to serve the Empire." The response came in the form of a hail of projectiles and energy blasts. Clarke ducked behind a ruined wall, mandibles clicking in frustration. "Tenacious vermin," he muttered. "Nixara, flank left. Kazvor, suppressing fire. The rest, with me." The squad moved with fluid grace, their attacks coordinated and lethal. Yet the humans held their ground, their faces set in grim determination as they fought to protect their home. A young human, barely more than a larva by Droo standards, caught Clarke's eye. The creature stood atop the barricade, hurling improvised explosives with surprising accuracy. Clarke raised his rifle, aiming for the easy kill, but hesitated as he saw an older human pull the young one down, shielding it with their own body. The moment of hesitation cost him. A lucky shot from a human weapon grazed his arm, leaving a scorched furrow in his exoskeleton. Clarke hissed in pain and fury, returning fire with renewed vigor. "Press the attack," he roared. "Show these humans the folly of resisting the Droo." The battle raged on, the humans giving ground inch by bloody inch. Clarke's squad suffered casualties. Kazvor fell to a sniper's shot, Lexthar to a hidden mine, but they pushed forward relentlessly. As they finally breached the command center, Clarke allowed himself a moment of exultation. They had done it. The heart of the colony was theirs. But as he surveyed the room, noting the destroyed communications equipment and wiped data banks, a cold feeling settled in his thorax. The humans had denied them vital intelligence, choosing to destroy it rather than let it fall into Droo hands. Squad leader Nixara approached, her exoskeleton marred with battle damage. "The humans, they fight with a ferocity I have not seen before, and their tactics, they adapt quickly." Clarke wanted to dismiss her concerns, to reaffirm the superiority of the Droo, but the evidence was all around them. The higher-than-expected casualties, the destroyed intel, the sheer determination of the human defenders. "It matters not," he said, as much to convince himself as Nixara. "We have taken their command center. The colony will fall. It is only a matter of time." As if in answer to his words, a distant rumble shook the building. Krell rushed to a viewport, his compound eyes widening at the sight that greeted him. On the horizon, dropping from the clouds like avenging angels, came wave after wave of human ships. Reinforcements had arrived far sooner than the Droo had believed possible. Krell's mandibles clicked rapidly, a Droo expression of disbelief and concern. This was not how it was supposed to go. This was not how Droo victories were won. For the first time since the mission began, a tendril of genuine fear wormed its way into Krell's heart. What had they gotten themselves into? The command center shuddered under the impact of human weaponry. Krell steadied himself against a console, his compound eyes fixed on the tactical display. All around the colony, red indicators flashed, showing Droo positions under heavy assault. Status report, he barked, turning to what remained of his squad. Nyxara's antennae twitched nervously as she responded. "It's not good, squad leader. The humans are using our own drop ships against us, turning them into mobile gun platforms. They've adapted their weapons to penetrate our shield frequencies, and they're using our communication channels to coordinate their attacks." Krell's mandibles clicked in frustration. How had the humans managed this so quickly? It defied everything he knew about warfare, about the supposed superiority of Droo military doctrine. Squad leader, another soldier, Vexthar, interrupted. "You need to see this." On a salvaged human view screen, footage played of the ongoing battle. Krell watched in disbelief as human civilians wielded repurposed Droo weapons with surprising efficiency. In one scene, a human child deftly reprogrammed a Droo sentry bot, turning it against its former masters. "Impossible," Krell chittered. "They couldn't have learned our systems so quickly. This must be some sort of trick, some pre-prepared countermeasure." But even as he spoke the words, he knew they rang hollow. The evidence was clear: the humans were adapting, evolving their tactics in real time to counter the Droo assault. Explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling as Krell made a decision. "We need to regroup with the main force," he announced. "This position is no longer tenable." As they prepared to move out, a transmission came through on the Droo command frequency. The voice of Supreme Commander Vex filled the room, tinged with static and something Krell had never heard before in a superior's voice: fear. "All units, be advised. The humans have breached our fleet's defenses. They're using some kind of biomechanical interfaces to control our ships. Fall back to defensive positions and prepare for. The transmission cut off abruptly. Krell stood frozen, his mind reeling from the implications. The humans hadn't just adapted to Droo ground tactics, they'd somehow turned the Droo's superior space technology against them as well. "Orders." Squad leader Nyxara's voice snapped him back to the present. Krell's training took over. "We follow the Supreme Commander's last order. Fall back, regroup, and hold our ground. The Empire depends on us." They fought their way out of the command center, every step contested by the now emboldened human forces. Krell saw his squad mates fall one by one. Vexthar to a repurposed Droo plasma cannon. Kilvan to a swarm of small explosive drones that seemed to anticipate his every move. As they neared the designated fallback point, Krell witnessed a sight that shook him to his core. A group of human soldiers, their bodies partially merged with salvaged Droo technology, moved with an eerie synchronization. They fought not as individuals, but as a single, terrifyingly effective unit. "What are they?" Nyxara whispered, her usual bravado gone. Krell had no answer. This went beyond mere adaptation. The humans weren't just using Droo technology, they were integrating with it, becoming something new and terrifying in the process. They finally reached the fallback point, a fortified position where the remaining Droo forces had gathered. The scene was one of chaos and desperation. Wounded soldiers lay everywhere, their crystalline blood staining the ground. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt exoskeletons and the constant chatter of weaponry. A senior officer approached Krell. "Report, squad leader." Krell straightened, forcing his voice to remain steady. "The command center is lost, sir. The humans have adapted our technology and are using it against us with unprecedented skill. Our communication networks are compromised, and we've lost contact with the fleet." The officer's antennae drooped, a sign of deep distress. It's the same all across the colony. We've lost over 70% of our forces, and the humans keep coming. They're not just fighting us, they're learning from us, evolving with every engagement. What are our orders? Sir Krell asked, dreading the answer. The officer's compound eyes seemed to dim. Hold the line. That's all we can do now. Hold the line and pray for reinforcements. As Krell took up a defensive position, his mind raced. Everything he'd been taught about Droo's superiority, about the inevitability of their victory, crumbled in the face of the reality before him. The humans weren't just enemies to be conquered, they were a force of nature, adapting and evolving at a pace that defied comprehension. For the first time in his life, Krell felt a sensation that went beyond fear, beyond doubt. As he watched the horizon light up with the approach of another human assault wave, he felt something he never thought possible: respect for his enemy. But there was no time to dwell on these revolutionary thoughts. The humans were coming, and Krell was a soldier of the Droo Empire. Whatever doubts plagued his mind, whatever respect he might feel for his foe, he would do his duty. As the first wave of human attackers came into view, a curious mix of flesh and Droo technology, Krell raised his weapon. For the Empire he chittered softly, no longer a battle cry, but a prayer. The battle for survival had begun. The relentless barrage of human attacks had turned the Droo's fortified position into a crumbling ruin. Krell crouched behind a shattered wall, his once gleaming exoskeleton now pitted and scarred. Beside him, Nyxara worked feverishly to repair a malfunctioning energy rifle. How much longer? Krell chittered, his antennae twitching nervously as he scanned the smoke-filled horizon. Almost there, Nyxara replied, her usually steady appendages trembling slightly. But squad leader, we're running out of power cells. Soon we'll be down to physical weapons. Krell's compound eyes dimmed at the thought. Reduced to fighting with primitive projectile weapons, or worse, their bare claws? It was unthinkable. And yet, as he looked around at the battered remnants of the Droo force, he realized it might soon be their reality. A series of explosions rocked their position, sending shards of crystalline debris raining down. Krell peeked over the wall, his tactical mind analyzing the human advance, even as his soldiers' instincts screamed danger. The humans had formed into small, highly mobile units. Each group seemed to be led by one of those disturbing human Droo hybrids, their movements unnaturally fluid and coordinated. As Krell watched, one unit flanked a Droo heavy weapons emplacement, disabling it with terrifying efficiency. Sector 7 is breached, came a panicked cry over the Droo comm channel. They're inside the perimeter. Krell's mind raced. The humans were inside their defenses, and with their superior adaptability, they'd soon overwhelm the remaining Droo forces. He needed to act, to find a way to turn the tide. Nyxara, he said, a plan forming in his mind: gather every soldier who can still fight. We're going to counterattack. Nyxara's antennae drooped in disbelief. Counterattack. But squad leader, we're outnumbered and outgunned. It's suicide. Perhaps, Krell admitted, but it's our only chance. If we can disrupt their command structure, maybe we can buy enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Even as he spoke the words, Krell knew how hollow they sounded. There would be no reinforcements. The Droo Empire, once the undisputed master of the galaxy, was likely crumbling on all fronts. As Nyxara rallied the surviving Droo, Krell allowed himself a moment of reflection. How had it come to this? The humans, whom they had dismissed as primitive and weak, had not only stood against the might of the Droo, but were on the verge of defeating them utterly. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Years ago, during his early military training, an old veteran had warned Krell's class about the dangers of underestimating one's enemy. True strength, the old Droo had said, lies not in believing in our own superiority, but in respecting the potential of others. At the time, Krell had dismissed it as the ramblings of a Droo past his prime. Now, with the evidence of human ingenuity and adaptability all around him, he understood the wisdom of those words. We're ready. Squad leader Nyxara's voice broke through his reverie. Krell looked at the ragtag group of Droo soldiers, their once proud forms battered and weary. But in their compound eyes, he saw a glimmer of the indomitable Droo spirit. They would fight to the last, not because they believed in victory, but because it was who they were. "For the Empire," Krell said, his voice low but firm. "For our honor." The responding chitter was subdued but resolute. Together they charged out from their crumbling defenses, straight into the teeth of the human advance. The battle that followed was a blur of chaos and desperation. Krell fought with a fury he had never known, his energy blade slicing through human armor, his remaining shots finding their marks with deadly precision. But for every human they felled, two more seemed to take their place. The Droo counterattack, initially surprising the human forces, soon lost momentum. Krell watched in horror as his fellow soldiers fell, their crystalline forms shattering under the onslaught of human weaponry. As they were pushed back, Krell found himself face to face with one of the human Droo hybrids. The creature's eyes, still disturbingly human, met his. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. In that gaze, Krell saw not the mindless barbarism he had been taught to expect from humans, but intelligence, determination, and something else. Empathy? The hybrid's human mouth moved, speaking words Krell couldn't hear over the din of battle, but somehow understood it doesn't have to be this way. The moment passed. The hybrid raised its weapon, a grotesque fusion of human and Droo technology. Krell prepared to meet his end, to die as a true Droo warrior. But the killing shot never came. A massive explosion rocked the battlefield, throwing both Krell and the hybrid to the ground. Through the smoke and debris, Krell saw a new wave of human reinforcements pouring in, their weapons blazing. "Fall back," Krell screamed, grabbing a stunned Nyxara and dragging her with him. "Fall back to the command post." As they retreated, Krell's tactical mind took in the dire situation. Their counterattack had failed. The human forces were overwhelming them on all sides. The proud Droo army, once the scourge of the galaxy, had been reduced to a handful of battered survivors. They reached the command post, little more than a fortified bunker now. As Krell sealed the blast doors, he knew with grim certainty that this would be their last stand. Inside, the few remaining Droo officers looked to him, their antennae drooping in exhaustion and despair. In their eyes, Krell saw the same question that burned in his own mind: how had it come to this? As the sounds of approaching human forces grew louder, Krell made a decision. He would not let his soldiers die in vain. Somehow, some way, he would find a path forward, even if it meant questioning everything he had ever believed about the Droo, about humans, about the very nature of strength and honor. The command bunker shuddered under the relentless assault of human weaponry. Dust and fragments of crystalline structures rained down on the handful of surviving Droo. Krell stood at the center of the room, his once proud exoskeleton now a patchwork of scars and hastily applied sealant. "Status report," he demanded, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders. Nyxara, her own form battered almost beyond recognition, approached with a holographic display. It's over, squad leader. Our outer defenses have fallen. The humans have us surrounded on all sides. We've lost contact with all other Droo forces on the planet." A heavy silence fell over the room. The reality of their situation was undeniable, yet none dared speak the words that hung in the air. Finally, a young soldier, barely out of his larval stage, chittered softly, Perhaps we should consider surrender." The words hit Krell like a physical blow. Surrender? The very concept was anathema to everything he had ever been taught, everything he believed about what it meant to be Droo. "Never," snapped an older officer, his mandibles clicking furiously. "We are Droo. We do not surrender. We fight to the last for the glory of the Empire." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, but Krell noticed they lacked the fervor of true conviction. He saw fear in the eyes of his soldiers, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of Droo pride could mask. As if to punctuate the direness of their situation, the bunker's communication system crackled to life. A human voice, speaking flawless Droo, filled the room. "Attention, Droo forces. This is Colonel Elena Martinez of the Earth Defense Force. Your position is surrounded. Your reinforcements are not coming. The Droo Empire is in full retreat across all fronts. Lay down your weapons and you will be treated fairly under galactic law. You have 1 hour to respond." The transmission cut off, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Krell's mind raced. Could it be true? The Empire in full retreat. It seemed impossible. And yet, hadn't they already witnessed the impossible on this battlefield? It's a trick, the older officer snarled. Human lies to weaken our resolve. We must fight on. But Krell wasn't so sure. He thought back to the human-Droo hybrid he had faced, to the empathy he had seen in those strange eyes. He thought of the incredible adaptability the humans had shown, their ability to turn Droo strength against them. For the first time in his life, Krell allowed himself to consider a heretical thought. What if the Droo were wrong? What if their unyielding pride, their belief in their own superiority, was not a strength but a fatal weakness? Squad leader Nixara's voice cut through his thoughts. What are your orders? All eyes turned to Krell. In that moment, he felt the weight of Droo history, of countless generations of warriors who had lived and died by the code of never surrendering, never showing weakness. But he also saw the faces of his soldiers, good Droo, who had fought bravely and now faced certain death. Was it truly honorable to lead them to a pointless slaughter? Krell began, his voice faltering. I believe we should consider the human offer. The room erupted in a cacophony of clicks and hisses. Some voices raised in outrage, others in desperate relief. Traitor. Coward. Thank the ancestors we might live. Krell raised his arms, calling for silence. Listen to me. We have fought with honor. We have upheld the traditions of the Droo. But look around you. Our empire is crumbling, our forces decimated. Is it not also our duty to ensure the survival of our species? The older officer stepped forward, mandibles quivering with rage. I would rather die 1,000 deaths than live as a human prisoner. Who will stand with me? Who will uphold the true honor of the Droo? A tense moment passed. Then, slowly, a few soldiers moved to stand beside the officer. But many more remained where they were, looking to Krell with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Krell felt a profound sadness as he looked at the divided remnants of his force. This, he realized, was the true cost of the Droo's unyielding ways. Not just defeat on the battlefield, but the shattering of their unity, the very core of what made them Droo. I will not force anyone to surrender, Krell said quietly. Those who wish to fight to the end have that right. But I also will not condemn those who see another path to death. Each of us must decide for ourselves what honor demands. As if in response to his words, a new sound cut through the rumble of distant explosions. The bunker's external sensors picked up movement outside. On the view screens, Krell saw human forces taking up positions, preparing for a final assault. The moment of decision had arrived. Fight and die, or take a step into the unknown. Krell looked at Nixara, seeing his own turmoil reflected in her compound eyes. Then, with a deep breath, he made his choice. May the ancestors forgive us, he whispered, reaching for the communication panel to respond to the human colonel. Krell's claw hovered over the communication panel, the weight of his decision bearing down on him like a collapsing star. In that moment, a new sound cut through the tense silence of the bunker, the unmistakable whine of Droo energy weapons. Reinforcements, someone cried out, hope surging through the room. But Krell knew better. His tactical mind had already assessed their situation. There were no reinforcements coming. This was something else entirely. He turned to the view screen, and his suspicions were confirmed. The older officer and his loyal followers had taken matters into their own hands. They had breached the bunker's armory and were now pouring out onto the battlefield, screaming war cries and firing wildly at the surrounding human forces. No, Krell whispered, watching as his fellow Droo charged to their deaths. The humans, caught off guard by this sudden, desperate assault, fell back momentarily. But their retreat was tactical, disciplined. Krell could see them regrouping, bringing their superior numbers and adapted technology to bear. Squad leader Nixara's voice was barely audible over the chaos. What do we do? Krell looked around at the remaining Droo, saw the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. He thought of all they had been through, of the rigid code that had brought them to this point. In that moment, he made his final decision. "We fight," he said, his voice firm. "Not for the Empire, not for some misguided notion of Droo superiority, but for each other. We fight to show the humans and ourselves what true Droo honor looks like." A ripple of understanding passed through the group. Mandibles clicked in agreement, antennae raised in determination. But Clarke continued, "We fight smart. We fight with purpose. If we're to die here, let it mean something." Quickly, he outlined his plan. They would join the battle, but not in a blind charge. Instead, they would use their knowledge of Droo tactics to disrupt the human forces, to buy time for potential survivors to escape. As they prepared to leave the bunker, Clarke turned to Nyxara. "Whatever happens out there, it has been an honor serving with you." "And with you, Clarke," she replied, using his name for the first time. With a final look at the bunker that had been their last refuge, Clarke led his troops out into the chaos of battle. The scene that greeted them was one of utter devastation. The once pristine colony world was now a hellscape of twisted metal and shattered crystal. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of energy weapon discharge. Clarke's group moved with purpose, using the cover of debris and fallen war machines to flank the human positions. They fought with a coordination and discipline that stood in stark contrast to the frenzied last stand of their comrades. As they battled, Clarke found himself face to face once again with human ingenuity. He watched in a mix of horror and grudging admiration as human soldiers seamlessly integrated Droo technology into their tactics. A part of him couldn't help but wonder what the Droo might have achieved if they had been open to such adaptation. The fighting was intense, but Clarke could see that they were making a difference. Human communications were disrupted, their neat formations thrown into disarray by the unexpected precision of this final Droo assault. But the cost was high. One by one, Clarke's soldiers fell. He saw Nyxara take a hit that shattered her left arm, but she fought on. As the battle reached its crescendo, Clarke found himself pushed to the very limits of his enhanced physiology. His energy reserves were depleted, his exoskeleton cracked and failing. Yet still he fought on, driven by a sense of purpose he had never known before. In what he knew would be his final moments, Clarke's mind was clearer than it had ever been. He saw now the folly of the Droo's blind pride, the missed opportunities for growth and alliance. But he also recognized the strength at the core of his people, their determination, their unity in the face of adversity. A human soldier appeared before him, weapon raised. Clarke prepared for the end, but instead of firing, the human hesitated. In that moment of connection, Clarke saw not an enemy, but a fellow soldier, perhaps recognizing the same futility of their conflict. "Your people fought well," the human said in halting Droo language. "There is honor in knowing when to end a battle." Clarke chittered softly, a sound that in Droo culture conveyed both acknowledgement and regret. Perhaps, he replied, "we learned that lesson too late." Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.